Some of you may have noticed that it's been a while since my last modpack video, but in my defense, my version of Skyrim started playing up around the game's anniversary update release, but fortunately it miraculously fixed after I purchased the upgrade, which of course is an amazing coincidence. But the gap until the next video will be a lot shorter, so don't worry. Now, I am what you might consider blissfully naive, and so naturally, despite the fact I had less than 200 subscribers, I attempted to have people comment which modpack to make next. And you know what? Somebody actually did it. And then they deleted the comment shortly after. But it was too late, I saw it, I'm counting it, and today we are making a Barbarian modpack. I've split the mods up into categories and added chapters so you can navigate where you want. This pack will have some werewolf-themed stuff, but they are split into their own section, so you can easily skip that part if lycanthropy isn't your thing. Also, you will want to watch to the end of the video to see some of the bugs and conflicts that can arise with these mods, so that you aren't taken by surprise. With all that out of the way, let's get into the mods. First of all, I'm going to be starting with some mods that add in things our barbarian can wear. I've tried to keep the character unarmoured in appearance, to keep the barbarian aesthetic, but in a mechanical sense I've had to make some concessions, which I'll explain at the end of this segment. To start with, we have the Iron and Steel Barbarian Armour mods. They are both craftable, with the steel version requiring use of the Skyforge to do so. They provide the illusion of an unarmoured barbarian, while still giving the player some armour points to work with so that you still stand a chance in combat. I personally wasn't entirely a fan of the design of the steel version, but I still left it in the pack because it does its job just fine, and I think that I mainly didn't like it because of how it didn't mesh well with some of the other equipment mods I had installed. Next is Modular Bandoliers and Pauldrons. This mod adds a variety of accessories to be used in the early game, and I found that they complemented the other armour sets perfectly. They have the benefit of being modular, meaning that they can be worn in addition to other armour pieces to allow for more unique customization. I honestly think that this is a really strong mod, and the only downside is that it only has gear tailored towards the earlier part of the game. There are more expanded versions on PC that feature pauldrons to go with later armour sets, but I would love to see some more pauldrons for console. Moving on to a late game armour set, we have the Dragonbone Barbarian Armour. This set is also modular, allowing for customization, and I think it fits the barbarian theme well. Although depending on which variants you use, it can look a bit too heavy and restrictive. The only major downside to this set is that it's not craftable, and as such is not restricted by smithing level, but if that's an issue for you, then you can always impose your own rules as I do. For example, in this case, I didn't allow myself to seek out the armour until I had become capable of smithing traditional dragonbone armour. When you do wish to find the armour, it can be located in a chest at Frozen Dragon Cliff, just south of Dawnstar, protected by some ice wraiths and potentially a dragon, depending on campaign progress. Next, I've also got a couple of gear mods that are not armour focused, starting with Belt-Worn Dragon Priest masks from Warmonger Armory. This mod allows you to attach some of the Dragon Priest masks to your belt, gaining the effects from them without having to cover your character's face. As well as being practical, the masks look incredibly cool attached to the belt, and can give a sort of tribal appearance to the character. Then we have shoulder packs, adding craftable bags into the game that can increase carrying capacity. This is a variant of the standard backpacks mod, which is also really good. I personally prefer the style of these shoulder packs, but don't always choose to use them because they unfortunately don't work very well with cloaks or capes added by other mods, usually being completely covered. So if you're planning on using a cloak mod in your playthrough, you should probably use the regular backpack mod instead. But if not, I would highly recommend trying this version. Now that I've gone over those mods, I wanted to quickly talk about how they will fit into the playstyle of a barbarian. Naturally, I think that high stamina is a must, allowing for maximum power attacks and good movement. This would mean that light armour is the way to go. The issue being that a lot of these new sets I've added are heavy. The way to get around this is with the heavy armour perk, which prevents the heavy armour from slowing you down. Until I was able to unlock that perk, what I did was wear light armour while initially building up my character's stamina, then switch to heavy boots and gauntlets to build up the heavy armour skill, before finally transitioning into a full heavy armoured character once unlocking the necessary perk. Of course, that's just what I did. If you don't care too much about being weighed down, then starting off with heavy armour is the simpler option. Now, I've got a handful of weapon mods to go over. There are of course a variety of options for a barbarian playstyle, so I have a couple of collections here so that you can pick what you want. But I also have some mods specifically focusing on axes, as dual wield axes is what I decided to go for in my playthrough. Starting with the mod My Axe, which adds a custom one-handed axe for the player to find in Helgen. The main benefit of this axe, aside from having a lot of visual customization options, is that it can be upgraded using new materials as you level up your smithing. So while it may start as only an iron axe, it can be adjusted to take on the form of dwarven or ebony as you become more powerful, meaning that this axe is likely to be at your side for the entire game. You can also adjust the axe to make it two-handed if you would prefer to use it that way. Next, I have 3 weapon sets that I've grouped up because functionally they're about the same. They have the same stats, so you're unlikely to need more than one of these, it's down to personal preference. The first is Wolf Steel Weapons, which I would say is the best incorporated set. It has ebony stats, and as such requires ebony smithing to make, and they look really cool. Then we have Steelhorn Weapons, which visually is my favourite of the 3, and the one I ended up using. I've written in my notes that this is half balanced. Basically, these weapons have the stats of ebony, but can be crafted as soon as you have the steel smithing perk. The reason I've said that they have a bit of balancing is because they require ebony ingots to make, so it's not quite as easy as steel. As always, items being available a bit earlier than they should be isn't really a problem, but I think it's worth mentioning. And it's especially relevant for the last set, which can be made just as easily as standard steel weapons. But they have the stats of ebony. Again, if you find this a problem, then you should just hold off from using them. Something interesting that I also learned with this set is because they have ebony stats but only use steel materials, they are incredibly good to make when leveling smithing up. Next, we have a mod called Dual Wield Blocking, which does exactly what it sounds like. The mod changes your left attack into a block, which can be used to perform bash attacks. The dual wield attacks remain unchanged. This seems like a small mod, but it made a massive difference to my playstyle when I was using it. Mainly for the bash's ability to stun people, making them more susceptible to a dual power attack. I'd highly recommend bringing this mod for any character that uses 2 weapons. Another relatively small mod worth mentioning is Throwing Weapons Light, which simply adds in some craftable javelins, throwing knives, throwing axes, and smoke bombs, which I've added to give the character some ranged options that are more on theme. The mod also adds these items to enemy level lists, so you will find bandits start attacking you with them until you get closer or they run out of ammo. Moving on from equipment, I have some mods focused around wilderness survival, starting with Campfire and Frostfall. Campfire adds in a lot of elements that make travelling through Skyrim much more enjoyable. You're able to create fires that can be used for cooking, and you're able to craft some basic tools and shelter. Frostfall adds in a new survival element in the form of temperature, making certain areas of Skyrim far more dangerous. Although I would recommend Frostfall if you're looking for a survival experience, I didn't use it for this character. I could tell you it was because I didn't think it would fit with the mighty barbarian's aesthetic, but really it's because I couldn't be bothered. Another survival mod worth considering is I Need, which adds in hunger, thirst, and tiredness. This is always my go-to for this type of mod because it's highly customizable and adds another dimension to the game. Although I would avoid using this sort of mod if you plan on fast travelling a lot, because when fast travelling the new requirements feel more like a chore instead of a gameplay mechanic. Also, it's affected by beast form in a way that makes hunger and thirst less imposing or noticeable. So this one can be a hit or miss depending on how you're going to be playing. Next we have Wintersun, which essentially overhauls the way religion works throughout the game, making it a more relevant part of a character with new abilities gifted by your chosen deity. The system also provides you with a set of tenets to follow in order to keep your god happy and receive further blessings. These of course vary a lot, but to give an example, my barbarian was a follower of Hircine, and was expected to achieve non-stealth kills on living creatures, with bonuses available for killing enemies that were more powerful than me. I then also used the mod Placeable Shrines, which I didn't find to be that necessary mechanically, thanks to Wintersun, but from a roleplay perspective, I liked being able to set up a shrine of Hircine wherever I made camp. I've included the mod Tonics and Toxins because I think it's one that's always worth bringing. It vastly improves how food and potions work. I think that a barbarian is likely to be pretty competent when it comes to crafting potions from natural ingredients, mainly for health and stamina, or maybe damage buffs to reflect something like a Berserker brew. Even if you aren't planning on crafting your own potions, this mod will still change the potions that you find and buy, and will improve their functionality. To support this mod, I have Save the Salt, which reduces the requirement of salt pies in cooking, so that you can make food without needing to seek out this one thing all the time. This is also very useful if you're using the I Need mod mentioned earlier. Now I want to go over some more general aesthetic mods that I've added to the pack. These are more along the lines of texture and sound mods, with a couple of gameplay tweaks as well. First of all is Old Kingdom, a large overhaul that affects the weapons and armour in the game, making them look a lot better. This is a mod that I use on every single playthrough of the game, and I would always recommend bringing it. New armour variants are also added, with different styles to them. Some that I found fit the build quite well were the fur and hide variant sets. At the time of making this video, there has also been a recently released light version of the mod, featuring a lot of new weapons that can be crafted. The only catch with this version is that I find all the new weapons clog up the crafting system quite a bit, so I decided to stick with the original for this build. Moving on to some gameplay mods, we have Vokrii, which is a more lightweight version of Ordinator, offering a completely overhauled skill system with brand new perk trees that serve to make skill choices much more impactful. I've also added Imperious, which overhauls the race system, offering some new abilities, redesigned starting stats, and a unique quest for each race that properly represents their history. Next, we have Big More Kill moves, which adds in some new finisher animations and allows them to be triggered more often. I picked this mod in particular because the animations included here were of a level of ferocious brutality that I really wanted for my barbarian. Finally, I have a music mod that helped make the playthrough feel a bit different to every other playthrough I've done. In particular, I used Treble Clef's Fantasy Pack, which I chose because I think it brings a sense of might to it that fits really well with the barbarian I was making. One small warning is that the mod doesn't do a great job of determining which tracks are appropriate when, so you are likely to experience battle music at all times, which can sometimes drown out dialogue. This can also lead to some good moments though. For example, I reached a point where I had to walk over encumbered back to Whiterun, and the insane music made even that mundane task feel epic and heroic. This next section is going to be covering Werewolf Mods, so if that's not something you're interested in, you may want to skip ahead in the video. Firstly, I wanted to have my character start the game as a werewolf, and not need to wait until the point in the Companion's questline as you normally would. There are a few options for starting the game as a werewolf, the first and most convenient of which is through the Alternate Start mod, and its add-on New Beginnings. The mod is well known for allowing you to begin the game in a multitude of different ways, but the one relevant here is the option to be a part of a werewolf tribe that gives you lycanthropy upon starting the game. This is the option I used, but if you don't want to use that starting option, I have two other mods for you instead. The Elderborn race begins the game as lycanthrope, and the aesthetic of it fits the Barbarian theme really well. The main reason I chose not to use it is because the starting stats felt a bit too strong, but honestly, looking back, I was probably just being picky. The other alternative is start as Lycanthrope, which is as straightforward as it sounds. When selecting your race, you have new options available to begin as a werewolf. The downside to this mod is it cancels out anything that affects or is based on your race, such as Imperious or Wintersun. Next, we have Moonlight Tales, which acts as a complete overhaul of the werewolf system, massively improving the perk tree and offering a wider variety of howls. The new perk tree offers some generally more powerful options, like increased stamina or health, as well as some abilities that are just convenient, like Revert Form, and a howl that functions in the same way as Dragon Rend. There are other Overhaul mods that are good, and some that can work alongside this one, but Moonlight Tales was just exactly what I wanted it to be. One of the other features added in by Moonlight Tales is the ability to customize the appearance of your Lycanthrope. Once again, there are other great mods that do this, and some of them can be used alongside this one, such as the Werefox skin, but I found that the options here were more than enough. You can even become a werebear if you want to. Because of this, I also added a mod adding the werewolf totems to a location on Solstheim that werebears are commonly found, as well as a mod that improves their appearance. These mods are entirely for atmosphere because the new perk tree added by Moonlight Tales makes the totems far less relevant. One more mod I used was Reliquary of Myth, which revamps the stats and abilities for all of the Daedric artifacts. In particular, for this character, I was interested in the Hircine items. This mod is pretty solid, but of course is only going to be relevant if you intend on actually using any of the artifacts, instead of just collecting them. I wanted to include some mods that would affect the companions for this pack. Even if you aren't playing as a werewolf, I think that their traditional Nord warrior style is perfect for the barbarian theme. The first mod I've got is Faction Outfits, which changes the armour worn throughout Skyrim to allow some of the less well-defined factions to stand out more. The main reason for this mod in this particular pack is because it affects the Silver Hand, giving them a sort of uniform that helps to separate them from your everyday bandit. Their new look features steel armour and a mage's hood, along with their classic silver weapons. And of course, many other factions get a similar revamp with this mod. Another mod to make factions look better is Character Overhaul. I've used all three because they're relatively small mods, but the important one here is the Companions mod. The most notable change is to the armour worn by certain members of the Companions, making them look more in keeping with the group's theme. It also gives Farkas and Vilkas sets of wolf armour to help them feel more like the high-ranking members that they are. Another change made by the character overhaul is to the faces of those affected. They are given some texture improvements to make them look a lot better. Finally, we have Companions Radiant Quests, which adds in some extra missions to complete in between those that progress the Companion's story. Basically, the purpose of this mod is to slow down the pacing of the questline a little bit. So it's really only going to interest you if you want to spend more time with the Companions. Much like with the Ranger mod pack, I've decided to include some mods that will add new quests, creatures, and locations to explore, starting with Jornhiem. This mod adds in a new Nordic ruin, which can be found at the throat of the world. The dungeon has a bit more of a messy layout, requiring a bit more thought to navigate, as well as new enemies and loot to find. As quest mods go, it's pretty short, but I really enjoyed it and would recommend giving it a try. As cool as that dungeon is, I felt the need to add in a slightly bigger mod to offer a wealth of new locations to explore, and I found no better option than Dark Moon of Elsewhere. The mod adds in an airship floating above Markarth that you can use to travel to the Khajiit homeland. A lot of new land is added in to explore, with a couple of dungeons and cities scattered across the map. The main reason I've added it to this pack is because of how much wild and open space there is in between map markers. I honestly feel like this mod was designed for werewolf players, because there are huge grass trails filled with animals to hunt along the way. It really is perfect for that style of character. The scenery also fits the outsider barbarian theme really well, with huge jungles to explore and set up camp in. There is a main quest, but it doesn't feature markers, so you have to sort of figure it out yourself. But even if that's not your thing, there's still a lot to do here. I wanted to include a mod featuring a variety of new enemy creatures scattered around the world, since I knew that this character would be great for exploring the wilds of Skyrim. I decided to go with Hunt of Hircine, mainly because it felt on theme. The first thing I should probably let you know is that despite its name, it has nothing to do with Hircine at all. The mod features a variety of new locations, and that can be pretty cool to visit, and there is a start of a questline, but it's currently unfinished, making some of the locations a bit uninteresting. The main feature Hunt of Hircine brings is the new creatures, which range from imps and goblins to ogres and minotaurs. Visually, they are all excellent, and mechanically, they're pretty good too. As well as creatures, I chose some mods to add new structures around the map, to make it feel a bit different to the Skyrim we've all travelled through for over a decade. And I started with schlitzes, villages and settlements, which adds some small towns around Skyrim. They have some basic shops and a couple of guards offering some fresh opportunities for places to stay. Also, if you are playing without fast travelling, then you get the added convenience of shops and taverns in extra locations. With this same theme of new locations to see when travelling, I've also added unique bridges of Skyrim. When I added this to the load order for my test playthrough, I was mainly choosing it because it's a small mod that I thought would be pretty cool. But after playing it, I've decided I'm adding it to my general load order to be used in every future playthrough. The designs of the bridges are fantastic, and they are perfectly styled after the location they are based in and the factions nearby. It's also an extremely small mod, so there's basically no reason not to use it with every character, which I intend to. The next mod I have is Majestic Mountains, which aims to improve the visuals of the snowy peaks located across Skyrim. It does exactly what it claims to, making the areas appear a bit more untamed and natural, which is really cool. I've also brought Obsidian Weathers and Seasons. As always, this mod is perfect for any playthrough that involves a lot of travelling in the wilds. If you're playing with the Frostfall mod, then this will work perfectly, making the rain and snow brought by Obsidian affect your warmth and dampness levels. Although I decided against using Frostfall, I still found that the harsh weathers really complemented the hardened adventurer vibe I was going for, with the mighty barbarian not needing protecting from the elements as they brave storms and blizzards without issue. Next, we have some house mods. I wanted my barbarian to live in the wilds, so traditional houses won't do, and the Campfire mod adds some options, but I wanted a permanent location for storage. The solution I found was the Cave of the Exile, a small cave outside of Riverwood containing some basic amenities for you to use. I thought it was a perfect house for this sort of character, but if you're looking for a more luxurious place to stay, another option is the Old Oak Den, which acts as an underground steading full of workstations and a lot of storage. That's the pack itself, but I have some honourable mentions to go over. These mods had a couple of things that I didn't like, but that doesn't mean that you won't, so they may still be worth checking out. First of all, we have a couple of armour mods named Wolf Knight and Dragonbreaker, which are perfectly good mods. They are well balanced and look cool. I just didn't think that they fit the barbarian theme very well. Then we have Barbarian Loincloths, which is of course in keeping with the modpack style. It just isn't really needed. I found that the early game armour like Fur or Forsworn served the same purpose, and I preferred the look of them over the pieces added by this mod. Next, we have some mods focused around lycanthropy, starting with Knight of the Wolf, which turns you into a werewolf lord. It functions as a sort of half-werewolf, and is a cool idea, but just wasn't really what I wanted for this character. And in a similar vein, we have Elemental Werebears, which adds some spells that allow you to transform into an ice, fire, or lightning bear. Again, a cool idea, but not really what I wanted. The main issue I had is I think it's designed for playthroughs with cheats, as both the damage output and magicka requirements were very high. Finally, we have an axe mod that I decided not to use because it comes with some drawbacks. The mod is called the Leviathan Axe, and it adds in the weapon Kratos wields in God of War. The weapon looks really cool, and it has a great quest with lots of new locations available in order to acquire it, as well as a variety of upgrade and customization options, which are also really cool. The issue with this item is it is extremely unbalanced, and I don't just mean that you get it before you should be able to. This weapon is stronger than almost everything else you will ever be able to find or craft in the base game. This mod and axe is great, but use at your own risk. I chose not to, but I intend on making a build in the future more suited to a weapon like this. The final thing that I need to cover is the bugs and conflicts that come with some of the mods mentioned in this video, starting with Hunt of Hircine, which I found can sometimes cause crashes. They are mostly quite rare and don't reoccur when you reload the game, with the exception of those caused by attempting to visit an area to the south of Riften, which would crash the game every time I went there. So you should be careful where you travel when using this mod. The Old Kingdom mod also causes some crashes. Whenever I attempted to wear one of the sets of Forsworn armour added by the mod, the game would freeze, so you'll have to avoid that piece of armour. Another bug this mod has is the steel gauntlets. For some reason they render on the floor when they're being worn by you or by NPCs, making it appear like they have no hands. Finally, we have something with Dark Moon of Elsewhere, which is less of a bug and more of a missing element, but essentially it doesn't have its own map. It just uses the map of Skyrim and places its location markers over it, which isn't ideal. I also have a conflict worth warning you about. The mods Majestic Mountains and Jornhiem have an issue where some of the interiors of the Jornhiem dungeon will look a bit weird as a result of the changes made by Majestic Mountains. This is something that the mod authors feel is worth warning about in the description, but to be honest, in my playthrough, I thought it looked fine. And that's everything. Thank you for sticking around to the end. The next mod pack I'm going to make is going to be a more general one, using mods that I would bring on every playthrough if I had the space. After that, I'm either going to make a Vampiric Knight or a classic Bard pack, so be sure to let me know in the comments which you would prefer. If you enjoyed the video, then feel free to like and subscribe, it would help me out a lot, and you can click on one of the links on screen if you want to see my other videos. Thanks for watching.